So welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist podcast and video for those that are watching today. For those that have been here before, this is all about what we talk about is how do you create wealth through successful business endeavors. And that's as an entrepreneur that's growing a business, they make money as they're doing it, but then, what does it happen? How you create generational wealth oftentimes comes from when you exit that and the return on the investment of the time and the money that you put into it. And for the investors out there, the angel investors, the family offices, it's also about how you identify those entrepreneurs that you're going to invest in so that they, and which ones are most likely to move towards a profitable exit. But then also along the way, how you can participate in the growth of a company and then leading to a profitable exit. And most often the exits are with acquisitions. They don't go public. It's rarely compared to the whole world out there of how companies, get the return, the investors get the return, all this stuff is because they sell the company. So my guest today, Paul D'Souza, is I'll probably link it in the show notes. You probably see that down in the show notes. But we had an interview 3 years ago. We were trying to remember when we were talking about his book, The Market Has Changed, Have You? And we've stayed in touch all this time. Reached back out recently, and he was telling me about how much he's been involved in the merger acquisition business and identifying companies that are ready to get acquired, helping those that weren't quite ready to become ready. And that happens all through revenue. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Paul here and why this is the information that we are going to talk about today is so critical for those business owners out there that are, looking at the horizon. How do I get to a point of being able to sell my company in a year, 5 years, 10 years from now? This is a critical conversation that you're going to hear today or watch today if you're doing it on video. And then for those investors out there, it's important if you're in a company right now that doesn't seem to be moving where you want it to go, where you think you're going to get an exit, listen to the things that we're going to talk about, because this is what's happening in the marketplace and where it is right now in the middle of what we're dealing with this pandemic, how it's shifted. But we're also going to talk about sort of the differences between what you get a lot of buzz on, which are investors investing in tech companies and that whole thing. But there's a whole nother world out there that really hits the press, really makes a lot of tweets out there or wherever you get your news. But it's the real world of how wealth is created and companies are bought and long-term wealth is created through the long-term strategic play. So Paul is about validating, the everything for acquirers and validating the revenue for acquirers and fixing it for those seeking to grow the value of their company and attract the acquirer. That's exactly what we're talking about. Revenue is always the result. This is no new news here for people that have been listening to the show and any of you that are really understand business and read business books. But revenue is a result of the right marketing strategy, the sales process, delivery process, and the people and teams working together to help the customers have an amazing experience with you. And I took that directly off of Paul's website. So we know that's what he's all about, right? He's a venture advisor. He's a venture advisor to Loyal VC in Silicon Valley. He is a mentor on go-to-market strategies and revenue models at the Founder Institute. Before that, he served as a sales executive at RWD, selling medical communications to the pharmaceutical industry, and Root Consulting, which is focused on business intelligence solutions to the Fortune 500 company. Now he serves as a chief revenue officer as a service for his clients. And welcome to the show. And did that ring a bell when I gave your quote straight off your website? Did you go, gosh, that sounds really
I was wondering, like, wow, that's exactly what I said. You totally got me there.
No, at least I gave you credit, right? So
yeah, I was like, Oh my gosh, you know, it's like two peas in a pod with a box of chocolates.
But that is the true key elements for a successful company to succeed, which is really based off of revenue, right?
Yeah, you
So
know, thank you for what you said because I just one comment I want to make. I mean, beautiful, you know, sort of intro, if you would. But for your audience and people that are going to be listening in terms of or listening to what I say, right? I actually speak to exactly what you said, both sides of the coin, right? So I'm speaking to entrepreneurs. If you're an entrepreneur, you'll hear things that I'm going to say about things that can help you increase revenue and bring value to your business. You know, either you have a lifestyle business or you're creating value. But
right,
also then from the investor side, right? They're talking to me because they're looking for opportunities. Like, what do you invest in today, right? And today's investment strategy is very different. And you know, we're actually going back 100 years. We're going back to the old-fashioned, you know, investment market where you're really looking for companies that are going to be solid and ride through the pandemic. I think there's tremendous opportunity right now because a lot of the valuations are low, a lot of the numbers are low, but for the companies that can ride through, it's a great time to get in. You'll be able to rock it out 18 months from now.
right, right. So you have been, just to kind of connect a couple of dots from your corporate experience to where you are now, you know, you didn't just hop from being a sales executive into understanding, this value proposition for, selling a company or acquiring a company. Talk a little bit, but connect the dots in there for our audience about how you gain the knowledge that you have right now.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it was kind of surprising for me. I could not have planned it, right, Karen? I morphed into it, but I stayed on the path of revenue. And when you first, I was a sales guy, and then when you look at sales and you look at revenue, you start saying, okay, what's the difference? What are those distinctions? And the distinctions really are that a sale is a transaction, but then you got to build a relationship of trust with that prospect who becomes a customer, who then becomes a client, right? They're very different mindsets and moods, if you would, between those three. And you start building more of a client base than a customer base. Customers transactional, clients are more relationship based, because that's when you tap into value and profitability. So that's what I was doing. And then I started mentoring students, companies through the Founder Institute. And then the investment community got excited about who I was. And actually, the first project I was sent to Guadalajara, Mexico, where the company that got funded in the Silicon Valley, but their back office and their first set of customers were in Mexico. And then I started helping that startup because they got funded by the VCs. And I started helping those investments be more solid by closing more deals, increasing the deal at Philip Morris, closing Audi Mexico. In fact, we were in the manufacturing space, going to walking with people. I don't speak Spanish, but walking with the team there and really masterminding, quarterbacking the deal and bringing deals in. Now, this supported the investment community. And that's when I got more investors looking at me and the investment community say, hey, help us make our investments more profitable. Help us reduce risk. And then I focused there because that was my pivot. In fact,
Okay.
now I'm thinking, I was reconfirming. I've been having thoughts about actually building my own fund, if you would, or my own, I like an investment club, right? Because what I've got now is I love rolling up my sleeves and being in the trenches, helping companies figure out the right go-to-market strategy. I just recorded a video this morning, and I'm going to post it on YouTube. I'm getting tired of seeing go-to-market strategies today. Somebody sent me from a class last week I did on a virtual cohort for one of the accelerators. Somebody sent me an executive summary this morning for something that is irrelevant for the COVID marketplace. I'm like, what are you thinking? Vacation planning as a no one's planning vacations right now. They should not
Right.
be. That's such a waste of everybody's time, as an example, right? I mean, I was so upset. I said, no, I'm actually going to do a video about that. Make sure from the entrepreneurs that your offerings, your solutions make sense for today's market.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the same token, I've had, a woman I love women-owned businesses for some reason. Synergy. I don't know why. But here's another opportunity with the lady. My 8 o'clock call this morning was with a lady who has got a good opportunity and has not, first-time entrepreneur, doesn't know really how to pitch her offering. I gave her a structure for an executive summary. She's coached her how to talk about it, right? She had a conversation, and then she called me back and said, "My gosh, it worked. I've got something to actually." I pulled the Columbo strategy on it, right? And it worked. And we're moving forward and I haven't made a decision, but it's a positive movement. So my journey has been there, focusing on the entrepreneur, focusing on the strategies, first closing deals, then building relationships of trust, right? So that you can create more value in the company. And when you create more value, then you get more customers and you get more investors. Because now it's become once there's value in the market, everybody gets excited. So
Right.
where my sort of value chain is along that path from transactional sales, first the strategy, transaction sales, relationship sales, add more value, and then coach the entrepreneurs on what next. What next? Again, it's for me, I care about, my tagline for life and through my nonprofit and everything I do. One sentence, I help people find their joy, right? But I do that down to the transactional level. And even though the transactions change, if you stay authentic to people being in their power, the entrepreneur being in the power, making sure they create something of value that the investors will be interested. And I coach the investors to make sure, hey, is this the right investment? Because I would hate for you to make the wrong investment. And I coach them to make sure that it's a long-term strategy as well.
Okay. Great. Yes. So as we start, before we start talking about, the actual shift and kind of where things are going with uh, this value investing or the value acquisition model, let's first set the stage by comparing the types of acquisitions that are done, so people have a point of reference, right? So you have,
Yeah.
we see a lot of what I mentioned early on, this hype, right? You get a technology company, a software company, or something like that. It gets money from angel investors and then VCs, and then oftentimes it will be acquired as a strategic investment to gain either the intellectual property, right? So let's just say it's a Google acquisition. It's to get the intellectual property or to get access to those customers that they have, right? Those are often why a bigger company will buy a smaller company. Coca-Cola does this. All the big Fortune 500s, when they make their acquisitions, it's to get a customer base and intellectual property or access to the property, to the product itself, right? And then on the other side of the scale or the table or wherever, the parallel path that oftentimes is not talked much about is where you get into the private equity funds and family offices, and sometimes they take a minority purchase with an idea to help grow and then exit along with the founders, and sometimes they do an outright acquisition. So talk about the differences of because I know you've worked with VCs, but you also work with these other sort of non-VC types of acquisitions, and sort of the mindset of that. And in the non-VC type of places, it's not, that like a Coca-Cola acquiring it, talk about the differences in what they're looking for when they start to look for a target investor. And my experience has been, and you tell me about yours, that on the tech side, that VC side, sometimes, and this is when we first got together, we were talking about, this, and we were setting up this call, was how had it shifted from, so many times it's not revenue based. It's more, it is just the eyeballs or the IP, versus family offices and these other ones are all the value proposition of the company. And then that later on, we'll get into kind of what makes up that, but just talk a little bit about what you see in the marketplace, the difference between those two sides of the balance of acquisitions and industry sectors.
Oh, sure. I think, from my current perspective, there are potentially four different investor categories. right?
Okay.
So because there's been some shifts and changes, and then maybe three, maybe four. I hope it's not five, but we'll go through them and pick the number. I'm just thinking about this as we speak, right? So I've done deals with hedge funds, right? $4 billion hedge fund out of Tokyo made an investment to one of the client companies I had, right? Where they're saying that technology makes sense. Y'all are too small for us to make a really solid investment, but we'll do a trial investment. Then they had a small, because they actually make huge, 20 million, $30 million investments. That's not huge, but it's a little bigger investments. But they said, okay, we'll just do a seed investment with them. They gave us about $500,000 in two different checks they wrote at two different times over a 3-month period. So you have the hedge funds. They're investing in larger companies. They want companies for growth, right? And they will get in and get out at different places and phases in that growth, in that value structure. Then you've got the VCs, and those guys, again, they're hedging, they're just investing. Again, you've got to be in Silicon Valley over 11, $12 million for a VC to look at you in terms of the amount of money you're asking for. I had a company that was asking for $3 million in the Silicon Valley, and none of the VCs would look at him, and they said, well, you're just too small. Bring us $10 million, others you or more, we won't even look at you, right? Yeah, I mean, it was crazy and really amazing technology. Same technology that the hedge fund said we'll try. We love the technology, but you're too small. And they were asking for $3 million, and that was literally the wrong amount of money to ask for in the Silicon Valley. And then if you look at angels, there's a huge, and I'm not sure exactly when the shift happened. A few years ago, the majority of angels, I think, in the Silicon Valley don't invest directly with customers. With companies. They invest in funds. The funds then invest in companies. So that's been a huge shift, right? The early days of the Band of Angels, when we did get money from them with one of my earlier companies back in 2005 in the Silicon Valley, it was a bunch of guys dropping $25,000 checks, but each one came in individually. Now, they don't do anything individually. I've talked to a bunch of angels in Saratoga and the Silicon Valley, friends of mine, and they're like, no, Paulie, we're part of a fund, right? They've got $200,000 investable money, and they've put that in a larger fund, and they just work with one person, the fund manager, to figure out how's the fund doing. And these guys sit around and they look at all the term sheets and they look at all the details, but they don't make an individual call. They make a recommendation, and the fund manager, they do a joint approach, right? So because it's just cost of managing risk of time and money and all that kind of stuff. So that's been a different shift. Then you've got the fourth category, which is where I'm seeing a lot of activity, is what you would call the private investor. We would call them the angels, but they're not the professional, the angels who are now doing it full time, right? They're the Procter and Gamble manager that's got, has got about $150,000 they want to invest. They don't know where to invest. They're coming to me and they say, hey, Paul, do you have any companies you think, I should invest in, as an example, right? In the old days, they would have bought a Dunkin' Donuts franchise and been a silent investor, and they would have just had somebody else run it, right? Because they would have dropped, $100,000 and launched a small franchise like that. Those guys are getting excited about the tech space. Those guys are getting excited about the entrepreneurs, and I'm seeing a lot of that, right?
Yeah,
So
which is
those guys are saying,
my target market, right? For my book. That's exactly who I'm targeting with this book, for those execs that haven't been involved in angel investing before.
Exactly. So those guys, I've got a gentleman actually who wants to learn, wants to be closer to the company and doesn't like the fund model, right? He actually wants to get close. And my approach, I'm just very simple. I'm very hands-on. I'm not a slick investment, community guy, right? I don't know those details. I come in from the outside. I'm about solving problems, helping companies be successful, making profit, hiring, firing, right? I'm at that level of creating value. So with the COVID marketplace now, there's been a huge shift. When I worked with a private equity firm last year and into this year, I brought 19 deals to the table. COVID hit, and we couldn't close many of them because the family offices are being very careful where they're spending their money, right? Those guys were doing consolidated deals. They were sitting on $1.6 billion, right? 13, 14 family offices, 13, 15 LPs, a couple of bigger companies. They had a big pool of money to go to, but they would bring individual deals to different people in that conglomeration of investors, and they would put a federated deal together, right? So it was never one company, never one family office. You go to 3 or 4 family offices, and they would invest in a company. But then we were building sectors. So we were building a logistics sector. We were building a sin sector of alcohol and tobacco and cannabis type of investments, right? So that I think has changed, because those funds, especially the family office funds, the investments they made prior to the COVID, right, situation may not be doing so well today, and they want to be very careful in what they invest in moving forward. But the investments that they're thinking of are ones that'll go through the dip and come out on the other side and really sort of buy and hold deals. So I think that's been the silent big shift. There's a silent question. I'm not sure how many people are asking it publicly, but this is what I'm sensing is they're asking, will this business survive through the pandemic, and what will its trajectory be on the other side of it? They're a little more flexible in terms of the numbers don't have to be that big and sexy in the next 60, 90, 90 days or 1 year, but will it survive 18 months? Will it survive 2 years? And then what's the trajectory?
Yeah. And so the first part of what you were talking about were really people making, or funds making, minority investments that are just going to take the ride with the company, but the family offices are now shifting to not play that kind of role, but to do full out acquisitions, or are they also doing minority investments in companies that can ride the wave through the pandemic?
To be honest, I don't know. These guys have been holding on to the money in the last 3 months.
Okay.
And I'm specifically the family offices. I am talking to the small investors who want to put $25,000 in a company and asking me, hey, where can I put my money? But I personally, those guys dried up. They've not got back to me, and I moved on because I want to put deals together. I don't have time to hold and wait.
So yeah, let's talk about, because when we were preparing for this, you had some examples of companies doing outright acquisitions, and sort of this movement towards a renewed emphasis on manufacturing, and the idea of last mile of manufacturing, and the best practices, because for those folks that are looking at now, okay, here I am in 2020. I want to be able to sell my company. I want to survive this pandemic. I want to be able to sell my company in 2025, and then become my own angel investor or my own family office with that wealth that I can then go and invest in other things that grow my wealth over time. Right. So when they're looking at it, the things, you talked a lot about,
I'll give you specifics. So
and architecting that part of it, the metrics of it.
Yeah. So far, what I was talking about are the trends that I'm seeing in the market, right? So given those trends, I actually pivoted because I was not closing deal with the family offices. And then one of those 19 companies I was talking to hired me directly and said, I don't need a private equity to help me. I've got the cash. We're doing well. We're a 30-year-old company in the logistics space. We want to start acquiring smaller companies because we need to expand. I always say, even in a down market, you have a market. And then logistics is a huge growing space in this pandemic, and it's here to stay. As people stay away from business, as they stay away from restaurants, as they stay away from malls, as they don't go out for the next 18 months and then beyond, they'll be very careful how they go out. I think we'll go back to some sort of normalcy, but it's not going to be what we did before. Logistics is going to be a strong channel in the market. Goods will have to be moved so that people can live a good quality life, right? People will stay where they are and they'll stay safe, but the products will move to them. So logistics companies are rocking, and a client has hired me specifically to drive the M&A strategy. So what I'm doing now is they've got money in the bank, they're cash rich, and I'm putting deals together. So I'm calling up entrepreneurs and saying, hey, where are you? Are you surviving? Are you doing well? What do you have? Do you have infrastructure? Are you open to an acquisition? right? Or do you want to just deal with a partnership, see if it's the right fit? I lost a deal recently because they were really focusing on the right fit. They wanted to partner, but then the company owner said, no, we're going to write this out ourselves, because they were growing, but he was more interested in keeping his employees safe and secure because they've been with them for 30 years. Right. And so what I've realized more often than not, I'm getting declined by entrepreneurs who are saying, what would I do next? I'm not yet ready to sell, because being in logistics, they're already seeing growth. I'm also talking to assembly plants, right? There's a lot of shift and movement happening in the assembly as well because of, the China crisis. The US has basically really impacted negatively the stability of Chinese manufacturing ecosystem. They have a good supply chain, so you can acquire components very easily from China. Shipping and transportation is getting super costly. From an average of $3 a kilo, air freight last year, $8.40 this month per kilo. So your shipping costs have gone up 3.5 to 3%. I mean, 200 to almost 300%. That's the problem with China. But it's cheaper to bring components because they're less weight, less complexity, bring components. And we're doing now, what I'm helping companies do is doing that last mile manufacturing in the US. We're doing the final assembly in the US. Or if it makes sense, we'll go to Tijuana, Mexico, because of the new NAFTA, the USMCA deal, right? You can protect your IP a little better, right? So
Yeah.
my point is, these changes are here to stay. And what companies or people with money are noticing this and saying, okay, these are good investments. These are good areas to invest in. They'll ride the pandemic. They'll grow as we move into the new economy post-COVID. So it's a good investment to buy and hold at the moment.
Right. So that kind of leads into what we had talked about, what I mentioned earlier, was these bigger companies making, strategic acquisitions because they want to grow their marketplace. They want to grow their presence in the marketplace through the acquisition of a new division that complements what they're doing, or just more customers that they can cross sell their existing products to and stuff like that. So if you're a company like that, say you've raised an angel round, and you kind of plateaued, and you're trying to figure out how to scale so you can do that, as we talked about in the next 5 years. One of the key things that you talk about is infrastructure. I also refer to that as, your operational processes, automating a lot of your systems so that you can be more efficient and therefore more profitable in that. Talk about how you help companies figure out what is a red flag that they've got an issue, or areas where you can look at that, say this is how you can, either decrease your expenses because of inefficiency, or increase your revenue because of your inventory churns, or because of your sales cycle process, things like that you can improve your processes on within that infrastructure, that therefore makes you more attractive to be acquired.
For sure. I've got two specific examples I'm working with right now. One is on the technology side, right? So this is a universal situation where businesses are letting people work from home. They're reducing the number of headcount in the office. A lot of companies are shutting down the office because they didn't realize they can manage 40 people remotely. Now, if you do that, what happens? You suddenly need very different IT infrastructure. So one of my clients is in the IT infrastructure space, and we are helping small businesses figure that out. Hey, you need different IT, you need security, you need automation, you need application integration, but you don't have an office. You don't, right? So that's whole different structures needed. The reason is, if you don't do that effectively, you don't manage your IT teams effectively, you don't manage your IT infrastructure effectively, you're going to increase risk and reduce the confidence that your customers have in their data with you, or the customer experience, because they want to be able to access the data that they need through you and from you. Very, 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 very important, right? So that's one area. And guess what? In sales, if you have a remote sales team now because no one's coming to the office and the customer does not want to meet you, I have a friend who works in a, I don't know how many $1 billion, their last G round of investment was $1.4 billion, round G, as in God, as in good, as he said, from SoftBank. $1.4 billion was just the investment round. It's a large window tinting company. The
Wow.
average sale is 8 months, and they don't even look at anything less than $1 million in revenue. He didn't think it was humanly possible for them to do that entire sales cycle remotely, right? Guess what? All his sales tech, martech, marketing technology platform infrastructure had to change because he had to bring visibility, he had to bring control systems, all that, proposals, making sure the customer, the employees, the salesperson send the right content. How do you put proposals and content management applications and all kinds of crazy things they never thought about because they should just hand paper or have people come to the office. They used to fly customers in because each project was so big, right? Technology's got to change. I care about that because that impacts revenue, that impacts value. If you're trying to sell your company, are you structured to win?
Structure to win.
Right? Are you structured to win?
Yeah.
That's why I've taken a stake in this company, in this technology company, because this is here to stay, guys. And a lot of CEOs, entrepreneurs have not figured it out, the nuances of how important that is. They're just band-aiding it, and it should be a strategy, right? The other thing is, if you're an investor, I want you to think about this with every investment you look at moving forward. Are they, from an IT perspective, structured to win? One, security, because a lot of people don't realize how now you've got employees working at home. Guess
Yep.
what? Each employee's what do you call it, wireless router at home is part of your network. There could be an
Yep.
intrusion at that point,
Yep.
as an example, right?
I
Are you
just did
thinking about
a, I know I just did a podcast with a company that focuses on creating that secure VPN type of thing for remote
right?
employees, because you also have potential within a household now with kids doing virtual learning and spouses working from home, that there's all kinds of inroads in, and even the Internet of Things out there, and the way people do work within hospitals and all kinds of places that are inroads in that hackers can get in if you don't have a good security strategy.
Yeah, in fact, I've got a prospect. I hope he's going to listen to this. He should be a client who's actually got a security layer on top of any and all IoT devices, right? Because the Jeep, he said, did a video where somebody from New York could hack into a Jeep that's being somebody else's driving, take over the braking and the acceleration system through their IoT devices, and
Yep.
cause an accident,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh yeah.
So
That's
there's
all
a
part of
video
that.
out there, and he solves that problem as an
Yep.
example. But with IoT devices, they're designed to talk to each other and other things. But what he's doing is bringing on board and then in the cloud security, so you can manage, swarms. They call them swarms of devices, right? And keep the entire IoT network safe. But anyway, so from an investment standpoint, if you're an investor, make sure you're asking those kinds of questions and checking whether the companies you're investing in are, protecting themselves against the risks associated with IT in today's marketplace. Very,
Right.
very important. Now, from
Okay.
a logistics and fulfillment standpoint, it's the same thing, right? How are companies surviving? Like, you take technology with this last mile manufacturing situation, right? So we're doing last mile manufacturing. We can get product ready in the US. We can protect your IT. That's one of my clients. If you're a hardware company and you want to increase the propensity for sales because you don't have that much interest, and you want to say, hey, you can try this product before you buy it. And a lot of people are doing that because the customers don't want to go to the stores. In fact, I was working, and I'm not sure how well they're doing now. There was a trial program going on, Samsung and one of the coffee companies, Nespro, I believe it was. They were actually in hand, compute and phones and things like that. I think that's a Samsung, was a phone. They were allowing, and they're trying this out because customers are staying at home. Customers don't want to go out. So can you send a product to a customer, try it out? If you like it, keep it, or send it back, and I'll send you a new one.
Yeah. And the
Okay?
cost of it, because there's a
This
lot
is
of
a
costs
whole,
in that. So how do you get the efficiency in that using
exactly,
automation and technology, right?
efficiencies. Yeah, so it is first you need control systems to authorize them. So you have to make sure that. Then it's about asset protection and asset management. You can get IoT devices and secure, and you want to know which product is gone when. So you've got to have your bells and whistles and reports going out. Because the sales guy might authorize a product to go to somebody and he might quit or get fired. And then what happens to that product? Who's managing that product? When the product comes back, you've got to make sure it's clean because nobody wants a dirty product. It's got to be put in a brand new box. Everybody, even though it's a demo, it should not have scratches on it. There's a
Right, right,
bunch of things that have to take place. And your HR department says, we're going to reduce to almost have zero people in the office. How are you going to do this now? How are you going to manage customer experience? How are you going to grow your business? That's
right.
why we're investing in logistics, right? Business models are changing. Business models are changing to manage risk and grow in this marketplace.
Right, right. Well, I know there was another thing, characteristic that you look at, and then, we've got probably about another 10 minutes, and I want to give you, I want to talk about your book a little bit too, as well, before we wrap up. Oh, but before I ask this last question, let me tell folks, if you're listening, you can learn more about Paul and the services that he offers by either going to CROAAS, so that stands for Chief Revenue Officer as a Service.com, or pauldesouza.com/services. And Paul is obviously Paul, and D'Souza is DSOUZA.com. So one of the
Yeah.
characteristics that you put value on when you're helping investors or funds find, or companies find, acquisition targets, is the partners that a company uses to execute. Who are their partners? Yeah, obviously it's the team and these other things that we've talked about and stuff like that. But something that's oftentimes people don't necessarily put a value on is the community that they have built around them that helps them to execute within, to make a great customer experience, but also have value for the workplace experience. So talk a little bit about how you look at, or what you look for when it comes to joint venture or partners that companies should have.
So yeah, that's a great question because these are subtle nuances that are not anchored in numbers, but impact numbers, right? So we really talk about people here. It's all about people and people expectations and their skills and things like that. So I'm working with a client in a prospect in Cleveland, and the company in California, everything tight, they're the right size, the right revenue, right history, they have the right services, the right infrastructure. But the only question mark is that she says, well, my husband retired, and my grandkids, they now with COVID, everybody's around, and I really want to spend more time at home. And that was the wrong answer, right? Because we need somebody with all capabilities running the shop, and because we're in California, right? So it's the right infrastructure, but we need leadership. We need people, right? Because she said, my son doesn't want to do this. My daughter doesn't want to do this. I'm the only one left stuck in the office. My husband's retired, and all the signs is that she's going to sign and run, right? And I don't want her to cut and run. I want her to get involved. I want her to stay. I want her to be the leader, keep the leadership position, and give us 3 to 5 years, and we can fade out and things like that. And then I've lost deals because companies say, Paul, I'm not willing to sell because what would I do? I don't know how many times I've lost an opportunity because of that, right? The other side of the same question. So to put a good deal together, you can't ignore the human element. The infrastructure is there, people capabilities. I don't look for, do you have the exact experience because in the Midwest, right, in Cincinnati, Ohio, or even, all of Ohio, a little bit of Northern Kentucky, it's all about the packaging industry, the printing, retail. It's very big. You'll have logistics companies there that do a lot of printing as well. We in the Silicon Valley, we medical devices, we're doing hardware. It's okay. The infrastructure to put, a production line or assembly line or to pick and pack, that's fundamental. We don't need our specifics. We're looking for the right people. We're looking for the right infrastructure. We're looking for the right technology. Can you integrate with applications? Can you do EDI? Can you do things like that? So we're looking at the fundamental level of capabilities, not specifics of past experience. And then we'll drop in all the other details that map to our business growth. But making sure we've got the right technology, the right infrastructure, but the people and their, individuals' goals and objectives is really important for us. And we're always listening, and because that's where the biggest risk happens.
Okay, well, so we didn't really talk about partners to execute, but do partners then make up for shortfalls of a CEO is, starting to check out, then the company can sustain because they've got the web of partners?
Yeah, I mean that's then we can always step in and but that adds cost, right? You want to be able to do all the prevention. So the partnership is very important. You always, especially in today's market, and we're looking for that infrastructure. But that's easy to assess right up front because especially in the logistics space, you're going to have partners, somebody to bring you pallets when you need them, boxes like Uline and things like that. You get boxes and supplies, FedEx, UPS, USPS. Those are pretty. I'm not in that space. I'm not worried, but I'm looking in logistics opportunities. Yes, we're looking at that, but to me, that's not a problem because it's easy to connect. A partner strategy to me is like table stakes. My bigger
Okay.
threat, my bigger threat is where the heads of the people involved, because
All right.
that's not easy to solve. That's
Okay.
not easy to solve.
Okay. Okay. That's good.
And
Good.
by the
Good to
way,
know.
to your question, your investors need to ask those questions, right? They really need to know what's going to happen. What do the owners, what are these entrepreneurs doing with their companies post investment? Because that's where all the risk at.
Right.
All
That
the
they don't
risk
just
is in that.
and then do they have the ability to shift from a lifestyle business or not become a lifestyle business because of their perspectives and attitudes and goals? So,
Yeah.
all right, well, let's talk about we got just a couple of minutes here. So the market has changed. Have you hold your book up?
Yeah. Oh, hold my book up.
There you go.
Yeah,
There you
the
go.
market is changing.
Yeah,
It's
and
still
that all
available on Amazon. If you want a signed copy, reach out to me off my website, and I'll get you a signed copy. I'll mail it to you. Feel like I need to write the book again, but what I'm doing is I'm using the book. I mean, today the market has changed again, right? And we talked about how it's changed. And what I'm doing with the Chief Revenue Officer as a service is really helping companies that either they have a fighting chance, or they think they don't want a fighting chance, or they want to actually sell. Because what's happening is there's a lot of engagement in the market today. Customer engagement has gone cheap. It's easy to get customers on a Zoom call and talk about stuff, but do they have a budget? Right?
right.
Will they transact? Why will they transact? Asking tough questions and qualifying opportunities today is the biggest single tip or technique or strategy that entrepreneurs have to really embrace to close deals that actually stick. Because you need budget, and very few people have the budget anymore.
Okay, well, thank you so much for all of these insights that you've offered today, Paul. And last 2 minutes, you got anything that you don't think you got in that you wanted to make a point about before we
Well,
say bye?
I like paying it forward. Thank you for that. So one is I'm here to help, right? If you have questions, reach out. Let's find each other. Second is I'm actually doing it is going to be live, and I'll send you the link, Karen, on the 23rd of November. The NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center out of San Francisco has asked me to teach a class on increasing revenue in a down market.
Oh,
So
nice.
please, if there's a way to plug that in, I'd love to invite your people to that. And if you can't make it on the 23rd, if this podcast comes out after the 23rd, the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center has got a lot of content free to entrepreneurs.
And so
And
will that
I'm
be
actually suggesting, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, so the recording of that will be
Will
available
be
at the
there.
Entrepreneur Center?
Yeah, for sure. They have a huge, like a university and a lot of people like me talking, but I'm actually asking them to do a weekly on a Thursday call with Paul event. So I want to be available once a week just for entrepreneurs and people ask me questions. Keep it live. You know, I love being on the firing line and answering real questions, because so much beautiful, mastermind stuff comes up that you would never think about, and it becomes very, very real.
Yeah.
So listen out for the work I'm doing, but the call with Paul with the NASDAQ Entrepreneurial Center, hopefully we'll close that deal. We'll structure that and do that in Q1 next year.
And they'll also probably be able to get it on your website too. I would guess you'd link back to
Oh,
it.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I also have some recordings on a podcast I do on iTunes called Keeping It Real in Business and Life.
Okay.
Right? Because now that I live on the ranch, I want people, when we start traveling again, to come and hang with horses here in New Mexico with me, and
Yeah.
work on your business plan, and work on your exit strategy, and work on the strategies that work to bring you the quality of life. Right? I want you to be in your joy.
I
And
guess
who
I
said
need to book
money?
one of those. It sounds pretty good.
You
Come to
know?
New Mexico, ride some horses, and solve the problems of the world and your business.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if we said we didn't cover it, but I'm rescuing wild Mustangs and teaching them how to play polo and be equine therapy horses. So I've got 7 horses right now. We couldn't touch them a few months ago, and now we're giving them hugs and teaching them how to eat an apple. Wild horses don't know what an apple is.
Wow, right.
I literally
Okay,
had to open their lips and shove one in.
that's funny. They got to trust you for that too. So, all right, Paul, thank you so much for your insights and joining me again. Look forward to continuing our conversations in the future and how we help entrepreneurs and investors succeed as compassionate capitalists in creating wealth. Onwards and upwards.
Thank you. I love what you're doing. God bless. Take
Thank
care.
you. And stay
Bye-bye.
tuned, everybody, for the closing segment after this.